Hey guys, Tom here. So today I thought it would be a good idea to compare Raw and SmackDown this week. If you guys want this to be a regular thing where I do it every single week comparing both shows, who came out better, who came out worse, then smash that like button and comment down below. I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on SmackDown and Raw this week. There's already reviews for each show up on the channel, but today we're purposely comparing each show, which was better, which was worse, and why do I think that. Anyway, let's get right into this video. I am going to say that Monday Night Raw was the much better show this week. But talking about SmackDown, I uploaded my SmackDown review. I didn't like it. I thought it was flat. But a lot of people really like SmackDown, which is fine. You can have your opinion. But I think we can all agree that Raw, even if you enjoyed SmackDown, even if you thought it was really good and you liked it, we can all agree that Raw was just better. It was way better than SmackDown, whether you liked SmackDown or not. And Raw just felt really, really good. I went out and said on my review that Raw was the best Monday Night Raw live I have ever personally seen. Forget Raw 1000, which was great. Forget any Raw after WrestleMania, which are usually pretty good. This was literally the best Raw live I have ever seen. It was that damn good. And it was always going to be hard for SmackDown to live up to that Monday Night Raw the night before. Some people like SmackDown, I didn't particularly like it, but it was always going to be hard for them to top Monday Night Raw after a show like that. But I think people are jumping on the bandwagon that Raw is now always going to be better. But I don't think that's the case, because I think since Raw went first, it always meant that SmackDown had to live up to what Raw had done the night before. And also, Monday Night Raw, they're not going to be able to pull things out of the hat like they did on this week's show. They had a Finn Balor debut, which obviously they can't do every week. That was pretty huge. They had an announcement of a Universal title. Obviously, they've done that. They can't do that next week. We had a Women's Championship match, a new champion. They can't do that every single week. And we had Finn Balor beat Roman Reigns clean in the main event to face Rollins at SummerSlam. Obviously, they can't do that every single week, so we might be looking back next week and saying, well, Raw was rubbish compared to last week. Well, they started Raw in good fashion. This was the first live Monday Night Raw since the brand extension, and they really shaped up and really showed us what they can do in the next upcoming weeks. But they can't do this every single week. But this show was great. Finn Balor's debut, the two Fatal 4-Way matches were awesome. The women's title match was the second best women's match of the year. Some people are forgetting the WrestleMania 32 Divas Triple Threat. That was amazing. So it was probably the second best women's match of the year. Finn Balor against Roman in the main event. Such a unique match. High stakes. That match against SummerSlam against Rollins is going to be amazing. So I think Raw was pretty perfect this week. But why didn't I like SmackDown? Well, it went second because Raw, it felt fresh. It felt something new. And it really had to live up to what Raw had done the night before. But it just didn't really hit that point. It just really didn't feel as big as Monday Night Raw. I think that's mainly due to the fact that they've got a really small roster and the fact there isn't much depth to that roster. And they actually proved that in the first match, the Battle Royal match. There was only really Apollo Crews and maybe Kalisto in that match, which I really cared about. The rest of the roster who were in this match were people you don't care about. The Ascension, I don't even know. There's literally nobody in that match I really cared about. And that is the huge problem people have between Raw and SmackDown. And it's going to continue that they don't really have much depth to that roster. And the only depth they do have to that roster was in that main event 6-man match. But when you look past the 6 people in that match, there's not really much to it, and that is the problem most people had with this week's show. It wasn't the fact that we hated the show, it just felt like they were trying to make it big, but they don't really have the roster to make it feel big. Now, the reason I thought Raw was way better was the fact that they had all these huge matches, but SmackDown had some huge matches. They had a Battle Royal, they had a 6-man main event, but people were a bit peeved that Dolph Ziggler won. They thought that Bray Wyatt made sense. He was the one that should have won the match, but it's fresh. It's something new that we haven't seen before. All the people saying that, oh, Dolph Ziggler, he deserves better. He's been a jobber for the last few months. They've been asking for this, and they've been given it, but they still find out a way to hate on it. This is a new era, and that is exactly what we've been given. Now, it does kind of feel a little bit strange, a little bit out of place, but it's something new that we haven't seen before. We've wanted Dolph Ziggler to get a big match in ages, and when we finally get it, some people still find a way to complain. So I think this could be good. Right now it feels kind of strange that he has got a main event match at SummerSlam for the WWE title against Dean Ambrose. It's face against face. It doesn't really make sense, but it's a new era, and I think it could be good. If Ziggler has some good matches in the next few weeks, people will really get excited about this. Is Ziggler going to turn heel? That's why I'm going to tune into SmackDown next week. It could potentially be really, really good. Also, what we've got to talk about is Monday Night Raw. They had a few things to pull out the bag, and they're not going to be able to do that every single week, are they? And they're not going to be able to have a women's title match every single week. They're not going to be able to have 2 fatal 4-way matches every single week. They're not going to be able to have Finn Balor debut every single week. So people saying that Raw is always better, SmackDown is never going to be able to be as good, is bullshit, because they can't do that every single week. They can't maintain this momentum they got in this show every single week. They just simply can't do it. So they got a good show. The first show was great, but can they do it in the next few weeks? I don't think so. And they might actually have shot themselves in the foot, because this show was great, but are they ever going to be able to top this Monday Night Raw? This was the best live Raw I've ever seen. I don't think they're going to be able to top this, so have they shot themselves in the foot a bit? Whereas SmackDown, they had a good show, but they didn't have a great show, so they are going to be able to top that eventually, which is something to look out for and something to wish for. But also, talking about SmackDown, it's also good because it was the best SmackDown we have ever seen in, 10 years? So that is something to talk about. That is a positive. It wasn't what we wanted. It didn't live up to Monday Night Raw in terms of feel, in terms of excitement, but it was still better than what we've seen in the last few years. This was a good SmackDown. It wasn't a great SmackDown compared to Raw, but it was still a good show compared to what we've seen recently. This was, the first time I've seen SmackDown, ignoring the draft, in ages. And yes, it's great to have Monday Night Raw on Mondays and then on SmackDown on Tuesdays. We get 2 shows, which is great, but SmackDown just didn't live up to Monday Night Raw, and that was the problem. Now, if Monday Night Raw had an average show, then maybe SmackDown would have felt a little bit better. People are shitting on SmackDown, saying it was awful, it was rubbish. It just wasn't as good as Raw, but it doesn't mean it was awful. It doesn't mean it was really bad. It just means it didn't live up to Monday Night Raw. Now, I much preferred Monday Night Raw this week, but it could change. The 2 fatal 4-way matches were amazing. The women's match was amazing. The main event was unique. Who thought we were going to get Finn Balor against Roman Reigns? But on SmackDown, it felt like they were trying to make it big, but nothing really worked. The Battle Royal, you didn't really care about because you kind of knew Apollo was going to win, and you also didn't really care about anybody in the match. And then the main event was the 6-man match. It was a bit of a clusterfuck. It was like they were trying to make it big, but it didn't really work. And then Dolph Ziggler won, which was kind of strange. But also they showcased all the women, which on paper it might have sounded good. Oh, we can get them all out here, show what they can do, but they're not really fighting for anything. Why did they all come out and then it just cut to commercial? It was kind of a bit strange. And the really annoying thing I didn't talk about in my SmackDown review was the fact that Heath Slater cut an amazing promo. One of the best promos, the best promo he will ever cut in his career. Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan started the show by saying there's no glass ceilings, anybody can reach for anything. So Heath Slater comes out, he cuts an amazing promo, something he'll never be able to do in his life. He actually has improved a lot. And he was reaching for that brass ring. And he does that, and he gets gored by a part-timer Rhino. So that didn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, you want to make big stars, but you don't. I don't quite understand that. They could have made something really big out of that whole promo. Is he going to get drafted to Raw or SmackDown? And then he just gets gored by Rhino. And who really cares about Rhino on SmackDown? I'm not that bothered. But they didn't even have the tag team everybody's talking about, American Alpha. They didn't have them on the show, which makes absolutely no sense. Raw went big. They had a Universal title announced. They had 2 Fatal 4-way matches, a Women's Championship match. And SmackDown, they didn't even have the 2 people everybody was looking forward to on SmackDown. They're going to debut next week. But why weren't they on the first show? That made absolutely no sense. Now, they announced Shelton Benjamin, but why wasn't he on SmackDown on the first show? Surely you want to make a big impression on the first show. It just felt like they were maybe saving it for next week. I'm not really quite sure why they didn't go big in the first show. And there wasn't really many storylines on SmackDown. There was build on Raw. You had progression of Finn Balor winning the Fatal 4-way matches, and then he'll go on to SummerSlam. You had Sasha Banks finally defeat Charlotte and go on and take the title from Charlotte. But on SmackDown, you had Apollo Crews win a Battle Royal to get in the 6-man tag. There's only really Dolph Ziggler, which got progression in this whole show. So it kind of felt maybe like Raw had felt in the last few years, but it was on SmackDown. It was a bit strange. But I definitely think Monday Night Raw was the better show this week, but can they maintain that in the next few weeks? I don't know. They've probably shot themselves in the foot considering this show was amazing. Can they contain that every single week? I don't think so, but it was still a better show this week. SmackDown felt a little bit flat. They could have done a little bit more. Their roster is tiny. They proved it with the big matches they tried to do, like the Battle Royal. Why did they think they should do that? It just exposed how limited their roster is. But we had a good week of wrestling. It's great that SmackDown is now live. It's way more relevant and people are actually watching SmackDown, which is great. Raw got the better rating, which is no surprise, but let's see. I don't think this SmackDown will have helped the ratings at all. It didn't really give me much of a reason to tune into SmackDown each week. Raw was way better, but are they going to be able to do that in the next few weeks? We'll have to see. Anyway, this was the video. Hit that like button. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Let me know down in the comments section. Anybody who abuses me for my opinion is going to get blocked. You're going to get taken to Block City, bitch. Anyway, take care. Spike your hair.